Also Dr. Aisyah Abu Bakar. Thank you. A few years ago, we met at Universitas Malaysia Sabah when Dr. Suwandono and I visited your university. Today, we met again by virtual and we invited you as the keynote speaker of our annual conference. Also, our head of department, Dr. Suwandono, as the keynote speaker also for the conference today. The Honorable all the lecturers of Master of International Relations Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. Also our moderator for this seminar today, Aripaksi, PhD. The Honorable, the reviewers, the Committee of International Student Conference on Humanity Issues, the presenters, participants coming from various universities. First of all, I would like to say thank you and welcome to this international conference held by Master of International Relations UMY. This is the 7th conference held by Master of International Relations UMY. I need to tell you that every year we invite scholars and researchers from all over the world to come to this conference in sharing their new findings and ideas in reading the developing social phenomena, mainly related to the humanity issues. Since the early 2020, the world is facing COVID-19 causes many aspects of our life in politics, in economy, culture, and humanities. This is the first time we hold the virtual conference where we receive 44 papers and 76 presenters coming from various universities and institutions. From the papers we receive indicate that all of us give high concern on the humanity issues after COVID-19. And also I would like to tell the presenters that we will select 10 selected papers from this conference and we will publish to the journals that will cooperate together with this conference. As the academicians, we are demanded to research and research, so we need to form, to share, and to develop our new finding in doing research in order to solve the problems we are facing. Ladies and gentlemen, Master of International Relations, UMY tried to build a strong academic culture, and the international conference that we have is one of the ways to build that. So we suggest the presenter to prepare the best paper based on research for the next conference that we will have. Ladies and gentlemen, before closing this speech, representing the head of the department, Dr. Suwandono, I would like to say thank you very much for the committee in preparing this conference. Also the presenters and participants. For the committee, we really appreciate what you have done in making this conference success. We know that it is not easy to prepare this conference in this pandemic era. Without your hard work, we will not be here today. So we do appreciate and we are proud of all of you. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dr. Ahmad Sahide. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our honor to have the Director of Postgraduate Program, Mr. Insinyur Sri Atmaja Putra Roshidi, to deliver his speech.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah Muhammadin وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Alhamdulillah, very good morning everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure and privilege to welcome all of you in this conference, the 7th International Student Conference on Humanities Issues, which is conducted by International Relation of Master Program in Postgraduate Program, Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. I would like to give my highest appreciation to my friend, Professor Dr. Alberto Gomez. It's very nice to see you again, even we meet you in virtually today, and also Dr. Aisyah Abu Bakar and Dr. Surwandono as guest speakers in this conference, and all the participants attending this conference this morning. The conference is a newly event, but maybe in this conference also the last year, all entire agenda will be handled virtually or digitally due to the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. And the major issues, major outcome that we expected for this conference is to construct the national and international collaboration among the students for discussing humanity issues and the framework. Even it is virtually, but we hope that the event can give us a good benefit and always been the betterment for our student. In such activities like a seminar panel and the discussion and maybe the special guests or lectures, we hope that the student can receive the good information, the knowledge sharing, and the useful collaboration between student and all participants. Last but not the least, I would like to thank you for all delegates, speakers, and the committee which conducting the hard work to be successful this conference. I wish everyone a safe and having fruitful conference in this event. With reciting Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, I officially open this conference. Thank you very much and enjoy this conference. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Insinyur Sri Atmaja Putra Roshidi. Excellency, distinguished guests, and all of the participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for us to have three keynote speakers. And before listening to the three speakers, allow me to read our moderator's curriculum vitae. Name, Ari Kusumapakshi, SIPMA, PhD. Date of birth, Palembang, the 11th February, 1984. Email, arikusumapakshi@umy.ac.id. And he studied undergraduate at Muhammadiyah University of Yogyakarta, Master Education at Universitas Jaume, and Doctoral Education at University of Bradford. He is a lecturer who has a lot of experience, of course, especially in the field of research and service. So please help me welcome Mr. Ari Kusumapakshi, SIPMA, PhD.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Bapak Sri Atmaja as the Director of Postgraduate Program at the University Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta, and all the speakers, distinguished speakers, presenters, participants of the conference. I am honored to be invited as the moderator of this discussion with the keynote speakers. in the beginning, Pak Sahide has already mentioned the three speakers that already here. Yeah, the first one is Bapak Surwandono, Dr. Surwandono. He is the director of the master program at International Relations Department, and also the senior professor in the University Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. We also honored to have Professor Alberto Gomez. Yeah. He is an emeritus professor at La Trobe University, Australia, and I met him for the first time in Spain actually, and I learned a lot from his expertise on anthropology and development. And that the third speaker that we are happy to have her is Dr. Ayesha Abu Bakar. Yeah. She is a senior lecturer at International Relations Program of the Faculty of Social Science and Humanities, Arts and Heritage. And also, she is the head of the research cluster on ethnography development at the Borneo Institute for Indigenous Studies, yeah, in University. Are facing, yeah, today, both like for example, the government society are facing at the moment, and how has the cooperation among the government able to reduce or to minimize this impact, and what can be learned, yeah, what can all the stakeholders or us as students or as academicians can learn about this, what policies should be done, and what are more research or research collaboration can be done, you know, to address, you know, to look at more this the impact of this pandemic, you know, into our situation, into our world today. So to discuss about this topic, now we got already three speakers. Each of them has got an expertise on their field. For example, Dr. Surwandono is an expert on politics and international relation, and he has published like, you know, quite a number of articles regarding these topics. And also, Prof. Alberto Gomez is also an expert on anthropology, politics, and development. He has quite, like, you know, experience doing research about orang asli in Malaysia. And the third speakers today, Dr. Ayesha Abu Bakar, is an expert on human rights, peace, and development. So each of these three speakers, I'm sure they have got many points to share to all of us here, and hopefully we can grab some points from these speakers, and then, yeah, we can take into account, you know, their comments, their advices, you know, the suggestion to strengthen, you know, our research, our further research. So without further ado, according to my list over here, that the first speakers that will deliver the point, the slide, will be Pak Surwandono. Pak Surwandono?
Okay, thank you, Mas Ari. Can I share my PowerPoint? Assalamualaikum.
Pak Sur?
Okay, hello, Mas Ari.
Okay.
Can I share my PowerPoint?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, so just a brief note that each speaker will have a time, maximum 40 minutes for their presentations. And then, I will like remind each speaker, and then we will have 30 minutes Q&A session. Yeah, we'll see how many, question later on that we can get from the participant. Okay, continue, Pak.
Okay, thank you very much for this time, Mr. Ari Paksi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin, hamdan syakirin, hamdan na'imin, hamdan yukafi mazidah, ya Rabbana lakal hamd, kama yanbaghi li jalali wasikal karim wa azimi sultanik. Okay, in the first one, I would like to say thank you for Professor Alberto Gomez and Ibu Ayesah Abu Bakar. It is very nice to meet you in this conference. Okay, I would to discuss about related the big data with the COVID-19 situation. I went to connecting with the human security issues. It's very important thing for us to discuss about it. Okay, let us to discuss. When we discuss about big data, we can got this words cloud. When we discuss COVID-19, the most popular words we discuss about, example, illness, disease, vaccine, and so on. But when we discuss in the humanity issues, like when we discuss about the political issues, cultural issues, economic issues, not discuss about it. It is very difficult to find term like the quality of democracy, the quality of peace, and so on. So when we discuss COVID-19 today, I think we just discuss about in the health issues like we discuss about disease, illness, virus, and so on. But when we discuss in deep understanding, it is must we discuss about the effect of COVID-19 to humanity. The first one, we discuss about the decrease in the economic activities lead to the income reduction and accelerate poverty. But in the popular words that can trace in the word cloud, it is not discussed about it. The second one, when we discuss about the effect of COVID-19 to humanity, we can discuss about the food production. So we can discuss about the food security. And the third one, we discuss about the health issues. The fourth one, we discuss about the closure of school, like in all of school in the world, to conduct learning by daring management, not by offline teaching. So give more implication to the declining of the quality of the education today. Like when we discuss about the result from the EPTANAS, like in the senior high school, elementary school in Indonesia, the score, the result score from the graduate student in the elementary or in the middle school is very, very low. And the third one, we can discuss about women are more vulnerable to the impact of the outbreak with the reduce of change to treatment. We discuss about the quality of women. The next effect, we can discuss about company have been forced to shut down, small business affected, and employment will increase. We discuss about the unemployment. The rate of unemployment in Indonesia is very, very high today. We can discuss in the 10 effect, we discuss about the COVID-19 may increase the inequalities of worsen economic disparities. Like when we discuss China, when we discuss about the COVID-19 in China, we discuss about the emerging virus from Wuhan. So today we can discuss about example the economy of China tend to grow because China can export many vaccine to all over. Like when we discuss about the other state like United States of America, like example Russia, to make example vaccine tourism. And Indonesia today want to adopt this idea to make vaccine tourism in Bali. The next effect of COVID-19 is the increased livelihood of conflict. But when we discuss in the popular words cloud, we cannot found about this item. Okay, next one. We want to focus on discussing about the COVID impact on human security in the three ideas. The first one we want to discuss about in the peace and conflict. We can assume when the pandemic emerged, the rate of conflict tend to be decline. But what happened today? The rate of conflict in the world tend to rise. It is very anomaly for us when we discuss about in the pandemic situation, the rate of conflict tend to arise. Okay, and the second one, when we want to discuss about the COVID impact on human security, especially in democracy. When we discuss about the pandemic situation, we can discuss about the solidarity. We can discuss about the make sense to focus on to make a proper life and so on. But when we discuss about it, we can find some situation like in Myanmar, what happened, situation in Myanmar, in the pandemic situation, we can discuss about the coup d'etat in Myanmar. It is very worst policy. The civilian government take over by military force. Like when we discuss about in Yemen, we discuss in Iraq, and in the last month we can discuss about the example, the aggression from Israel to Gaza Straits. It is very, very unsolidarity policy, unsolidarity action. And the third one, we can discuss about the COVID impact on human security. Like when we discuss about the impact to global economy. We can trace about this idea in some figure that I taken from some book that inform about it. Like when we discuss about the quality of economy related with the COVID-19 situation, UNDP, United Nations and Development Program, released about the effect about the pandemic COVID with the quality of economy. When we comparing about the situation with the example economic crisis in Asia in 1998, when we discuss about the economic crisis in Asia, the quality of economy not decline under zero growth. Like when we discuss about the global financial crisis in the 2008, especially in Europe, the rate of economic growth not decline under zero growth. But when we discuss about the effect of pandemic today, we can find some state, the established state like United Kingdom, in Europe, like when we discuss about Singapore in Southeast Asia, in the medium of 2020, we can discuss about United Kingdom and Singapore start in the crisis. When we discuss comparing with Indonesia, President Jokowi mentioned about the quality of economic growth in Indonesia in the meanest growths. So when we discuss about the simulation from UNDP, when the COVID-19 continue until in 2 years, so the implication for the economic growth can reach on the example the number of minus 30%. It is very, very worse situation for us. When we can manage the COVID effectively, I don't know what happened with the quality of a human being in the world. Okay, when we discuss about the economic issues, like we can find the information about the quality of conflict in peace, we take from the conflict barometer index. We can discuss about the quality of conflict, the level of conflict, like when we discuss about the color of black, we discuss about in the war situation. When we discuss about the dark of blue, we discuss about the limited war. We can find many area in this black area. Like we can discuss in the Latin of America. We can find in the Middle Africa and the East Africa. We can find in the example in the Asia. When we discuss in the Southeast Asia, we can discuss in India, in the dark blue. It's mean the quality of peace in the pandemic era not increase but decrease. It is very anomaly for us. It is important for us to discuss about it. Why the solidarity issue in the pandemic area not rise but decline. But in the low level, we hopefully to manage about the pandemic situation with the solidarity sense. We can collaborate to others, not conflict to others. It is very important for us to discuss about it. Okay, when we discuss about example, we take from the journal Development Studies. We take from the Scopus Library. We can find about the region, the state that's example conflict emerge and have relation with the rate of COVID-19 confirmed. But in my study, when we discuss about it, example, I gave an anomaly to us, like when we discuss about Yemen. Yemen in the example, very chronicle conflict post-Arab Spring. But when we discuss about the rate of COVID-19 in this area is very, very low. Like when we discuss about it in this color represent about the Yemen. The quality of conflict in Yemen tend to arise, but the rate of COVID-19 confirmed in this area is very low. But very different when we discuss about Iraq. The quality, the level of conflict is example about the rates of COVID-19. We can discuss about example in Philippines, like this one. It's similar when the conflict arise. So and the rate of example COVID-19 arise too. But Yemen is very anomaly situation to us. We can to study like from Prof. Alberto Gomez. We can study in the anthropology study. It's very, very nice to discuss about it. When a conflict emerged, but the pandemic situation not arise like the conflicts. Okay, when we discuss about COVID-19 and the conflict dynamics, we can discuss about some issues like we discussed group takes advantage of the global distraction created by the pandemics. We can discuss like in the Myanmar. We can discuss about example in the Middle East, like in the Libya, Iraq, Syria, Colombia, Mali, and Nigeria. We can discuss about the changes in the peacekeeping and crisis management operation. Especially when we discuss about in the political, we discuss about the temporary and most unilateral ceasefire. We hope the example in the Gaza Straits was the aggression of Israel, and the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel can be effective. We can discuss about in the pandemic situation, we can discuss about the civil unrest sparked by deteriorating social economic condition. We can discuss about the excessive use of force against civilians. In my opinion, this chart, this picture represent about the unsolidarity sense. Example, when we discuss about conflict and pandemics. It is interesting to discuss about it. Okay. The next, we want to discuss about democracy. The quality of democracy tend to decline in the pandemic situation. We expect when we discuss in the pandemic situation, the quality of democracy arise, but in the fact, the quality of democracy tend to decline. It is very unsolidarity, unlogical sense for us. Okay, I'm going to focus my study on big data. We want to discuss about the pandemic and the human security. I take from Scopus Library to discuss about it. It is very complex understanding. It is very complex situation when we discuss about the relation between COVID-19 and human security. I will focus about in the some variable that mentioned in the previous slides. Okay, the first one, we discuss about the post-failure learning when we want to discuss about the effect of COVID-19 and human security. When we discuss with the deaths variable as the central variable, it is must be discussed about the rate of deaths is very important. How many people deaths in the pandemic situation? I think more 1 million people. We can discuss about the region, like we discussed about India, like we discussed about China and so on. It's very important to discuss about it. We discuss about the rate of mortality and fatality of rates. Like when we discuss about in the third world, the death rate in the third world is very, very rise. Okay, when we discuss about the food security as the central variable, it is a must we discuss about the products. 2 minutes about the food insecurity, like we discussed about it, the food insecurity, it is a must we discuss about it. But like when we discuss in some countries, not discuss about it, just focus about how to take example lockdown policy, but not focus how to produce food, to maintain about the food production and so on. It is very important when we discuss about food security, we discuss about the product, we discuss about the production, we discuss about the food system and so on. Okay, in the next slide, we want to discuss about the capacity as in the central variable. It is a must we discuss about the technology. It is very important. When we discuss like in Indonesia to improve, to develop about genus, to detect about the COVID-19 phenomena, it is very smart innovation for Indonesia that can introduce and promote about the smart technology to detect about the COVID-19. But in Indonesia, when we discuss about capacity of Indonesia to produce about vaccine, it is very in the low policy. My study, when we discuss about in the example in the 1 years ago, the policy of vaccine production in Indonesia not be mainstream policy. So Indonesia depend on from China, depend on from Russia, depend on United States of America and so on. So it's very important for Indonesia that have huge population. It is a must to produce about the vaccine. But in Indonesia, discussion about vaccine is not a rise discussion. Okay, when we discuss about example, we use about the lockdown policy. It is very critical policy when we discuss about the pandemic situation. In Indonesia, we discuss about pembatasan sosial besar with the lockdown policy. When we discuss in Indonesia, lockdown policy tend to politicized by politicians. So the implication of lockdown is an effective policy. When we discuss about lockdown, it is must we discuss about the food insecurity. It's very different thing when we comparing about in Indonesia and in Malaysia. And then we want to know from Dr. Aisyah Abu Bakar about the food security from the lockdown policy in Malaysia. When we comparing in example in the Wuhan in the last years, when the Wuhan province takes policy lockdown, so the food security being the state responsibility from the state. So the civilian people just stay in the home and get many food from the government. But when we discuss in Indonesia, it's very different thing. So it is a must for discuss about it. So when we discuss about lockdown, we can discuss about the stress situation and crisis and so on. And the last, I want to discuss about the first pure idea with the crisis variable. It is very complex map when we discuss about it. So it is must we discuss about it in the prudent analysis, how to manage about the crisis in the pandemic crisis, in the pandemic situation. So I expect from the conference, we can discuss about it in deepening analysis. So we can contribute to the work, how to managing the pandemic area, the pandemic situation be an effective way. Thank you very much for Mas Ari and all participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Pak Sur, for your points. Yeah, there are a couple of things that Pak Sur wants to share us today in his presentations. For instance, he said, he mentioned about the the bias of the media or the information today that is more focused on the health itself, no, on the virus and the disease, no, instead of focus on some aspect of SDGs that should be focused on, like access to food, like women are vulnerable, because of limited access to treatment and so on and so forth. So the fact, then the consequence of this pandemic to the SDGs will be like much more significant, Pastor. And also, Pastor also mentioned the paradox of this pandemics into some aspect on human security. For example, impact on peace and conflict, which is like the number of conflict tend to rise, instead of going down. Yeah, he also point out the example of armed conflict, and also the same for the COVID, or the effect of COVID to democracy and COVID to global economy. So okay, for those who who has notes source points, you will yeah, you can list it now. Then if you have some question later on, then you can you can say that during the Q&A session. So we are moving to the next speaker, which is Prof. Alberto Gomez, who would like to share his presentation about the effect of pandemics to development. Yeah, Pak Gomez, time is yours.
Sure. Well, selamat pagi. Let me just get my PowerPoint slides from the beginning. So, selamat pagi to all the participants. I wish to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to give this keynote. I want to thank Dr. Suwan Dono, as well as my good friend Dr. Sri Amaja. It's been a while since I've last caught up with you, and of course my former student and now good friend. I'm going to promote him today and call him Pak Ari, because I usually call him Mas Ari. Okay, now I have a PowerPoint slide which I'm trying to get, and you can see the slide at the moment. So what I would like to do is to move on to the to build, I should say, from the excellent presentation by my fellow keynote speaker, Pak Suwa, and to start looking at how can we shape, a post-pandemic future. So this is the question that that I'd like to address in my presentation. Whenever you speak about the post-COVID world, you will find that various commentators will have these different words to describe. They would first of all say that we are going to have a new normal after the pandemic. And some would in fact say that we should snap back, that once the COVID pandemic is resolved, once the vaccination rollout is successful, then we will snap back. And the economic, the World Economic Forum have come up with the idea of once the end of the pandemic, we will have a great reset. And many different countries have spoken about we want to build back better. So the point I want to ask for you, and for you to reflect on, as all the participants of this important conference, what is normal? And that's the first question I want to ask you. And do we want a new normal, or do we need to seek what I would consider a new future? What would the new future look like? If it is snap back, what are we snapping back to? What is back? What sort of world did we live, or what sort of world existed before the pandemic? And great reset, what is it that we are resetting? This is the World Economic Forum saying that we should come up with what has been referred to as a great reset. So what is going to be reset? And to build back better, what does better mean? And who determines what is better? Who determines how are we going to achieve this so-called betterness? So I want to present, some of my points of view in regard to what this future world will look like. Um, okay. Now, when we talk about the future world, as some of you who know me well, my scholarship has been deeply inspired by indigenous peoples. I've spent a good part of almost 40 years researching among the Orang Asli in Peninsular Malaysia, and I have always had this inclination to resort to the wisdom of the indigenous peoples whenever I'm, confronted with what the future is going to be like. So I'm going to start off by actually presenting to you the idea from an indigenous person, and this is an elder from the Shuar tribe in Ecuador, presented in 1991, quite a number of years ago. And what he said was that your people dreamed of huge factories, tall buildings, as many cars as there are raindrops in the river. Now you begin to see that your dream is a nightmare. The question was asked, how might we make things better? That's simple, he said. All you have to do is change the dream. You need to plant a different seed, teach your children to dream new dreams. So today, the current pandemic is the COVID pandemic. And for the next few years, we are, in fact, will have to deal with the repercussions, the impacts of this pandemic. And some have predicted that we will only get out of this terrible situation, which has caused the lives and the livelihoods, which has destroyed the lives and the livelihoods of so many people right around the world in 2024. But there is an enduring nightmare that has been going on for a very long time. And this is the ecological calamity, the ecological problems that we face. And I'm talking about we as in terms of humanity. And the most one would consider to be the greatest existentialist threat to humanity is, of course, climate change. And we have to do everything that's possible to deal with this calamity. So the question is, what different seed? What is this different seed that we want to plant? And what might be the new dreams? So that's the question that I would like to address in my presentation today and for you to think about. David Suzuki has the Canadian environmentalist has stated this and quite recently, and I want to repeat what he had said. It's a very profound statement, which he says that it is clear that the mode that we have been practicing over the past 150 years has driven us into a ditch. And the last thing we want coming out of this COVID crisis is to get everything back going the way it was before the meltdown. So what is this way it was before the COVID crisis is the question. Now, in the last 40 years, humanity has, when we look at the economic, political, and social conditions, the world, in fact, has been structured along certain kind of a system that is referred to as neoliberalism. I know that many of you will be quite familiar with neoliberalism, but for those of you who are not, the concept of neoliberalism and the practice and the policy that has been implemented right around the world from the 1970s onwards, sometimes also in popular language is referred to as Thatcherism or Reaganomics from the late 1970s in in Britain, in the United Kingdom, and in US. And that spread very rapidly right around the world. Even in Indonesia, we can speak about neoliberal policies. And these neoliberal policies include, I've identified 5 different aspects of it. And I think it's important that we consider this is how the last 40 years of the world, this is how it has been structured. This is the system that has driven the various economic, social, and political conditions. The first is economic reform, the focus on economic growth at any cost. Then you have right around the world is policy of corporate tax cuts. Corporations, in fact, that drive these various neoliberal policies have focused on cuts for these corporations, deregulation, removing the various sorts of rules and regulations that was considered to curb any kind of open market system, and fiscal discipline, where the focus has been in ensuring that governments do not end up with huge debts. And if you look at what has happened during the pandemic, was precisely this problem of the countries and states and governments right around the world it was just totally impossible for them to have any sort of discipline, and they have in the process ended up with massive debts, trillions of dollars of debts right around the world. The other aspect of the neoliberalism is market reform, free trade, trade liberalization, eliminate subsidies and tariffs. And essentially, the focus here is this thing about the market, as if like when economists talk about the market, as if the market is alive and that the market is going to do this, the market is going to do that. And sometimes we need to remind these economists that the market actually does not exist. It is humans that have created the market. The only market that actually exists are the markets that you go to buy fish, and you buy, where you have traders selling, various sorts of commodities. But the market, as the way it's been described, in terms of having this power over human behavior, does not actually exist. Then we have capitalist expansion, because the economic reform and the market reform has focused on the expansion of capitalism, the globalization of capital, the focus on export orientation. Right around the world, we find that countries have been advised to export more. And one of the things that the states have been advised to is also to allow, to make, to create a kind of an economic situation that would allow much, freer foreign direct investment. The promotion of extractive industries like logging, mining, and various sorts of other kinds of forms of extraction. And the other thing that you would be familiar with is flexible production, where in the past we used to have factories that would produce goods all from that factory itself, but in flexible production you find that goods are produced in different parts of the world, and through supply chains they all come together and form the product that is then sold. Outsourcing is very much an part of this neoliberal economic and social policy. The other thing that I think you would be very familiar with as far as neoliberalism is concerned is the austerity measures, privatization, where government utilities were sold to private interests, the downsizing of governments, the downsizing of various sorts of public organizations, the casualization of work, the reducing of public expenditure. In other words, we will talk about this in the connection of in relation to COVID, and Pascasarjana has already touched on some of these. And the thing that concerns me most as an anthropologist is the social and cultural reorientation, how we have become obsessed with consumerism. We are not just satisfied with what we have got, we just keep on wanting to have more. we compete with one another, and competition has become very much a kind of a given in terms of the way people interact with one another. That if you want to succeed, you have been advised that you have to be competitive, and then you have a strong sense of individuation that has in many ways affected negatively community and cooperation. That has been very much a natural aspect of human societies. We have increase in greed. People want to accumulate as much as possible. We have also anti and altruism, where people don't want to share what they have. They want to keep it mainly for themselves. So this has in fact promoted in many ways people who are more selfish and self-centered. So that's the neoliberal social, political, and economic policies that have driven and societies, I would say, right around the world. You can be in any part of the world, in any corner or nook of the world, you will have had some kind of neoliberal experience. So neoliberal and I refer to it as oligarchic capitalism. In some cases, I also refer to this kind of capitalism as vampire capitalism. As those of you who know, the vampire attacks and sucks the blood of the victim, and then the victim then becomes transformed into a vampire. And this is how capitalism has essentially spread. The socio-economic conditions that relate to that are in fact the outcome of such form of capitalism is degradation. Our lives have been degraded, the environments have been degraded, the various sorts of social conditions have been degraded. There is increasing poverty, even though everyone speaks about the trickle-down economics that that will bring people out of poverty. But we actually look at it very carefully, and we find that poverty has increased right around the world. The thing that is stark in terms of the reality of the world today is inequality. The gap between the rich and the poor has widened, and then we have increased competition, increased individuality. People are more concerned about their individual and very selfish concerns, as I pointed out. But something that is not spoken of very frequently when one talks about neoliberal policies is the issue of precarity. Our lives have become more fragile, have become more precarious, have become more insecure. And this idea of precarity, in fact, has led to various people right around the world feeling terribly, discontent with their lives. They have become depressed. Increase, injustices, as the earlier, wonderful speech talks about conflict in different parts of the world. And before the COVID, of course, this kind of conflict and has arisen largely because of people wanting to address or readdress the issue of injustice and how they have been treated unjustly by the various regimes that they have, that rule over them. The behavioral and cultural aspects of it would be, greed and grievance, as I've talked about. And this is a dialectical relationship. We always have to keep in mind that the greed of one person or the greed of a small group of people will lead to the grievance, because those people feel excluded, those people feel disadvantaged, they feel discriminated, they feel, in a way, aggrieved because of their conditions. And the thing about people being aggrieved, so when we look at the rise of authoritarian regimes in Brazil or in India or in the US during Trump, you find that the people who are actually aggrieved, the ones who have been left out, the ones who have been excluded because of the greed of a very few people within their own countries, they tend to be terribly anxious, they tend to fear outsiders, and develop hatred. And so you have these authoritarian leaders in different parts of the world diverting the attention of the people who have been aggrieved to people who are considered to be outsiders or people who are different. So when you look at the case of the United States, you find an increased form of racism, which relates ultimately to neoliberal policies. Alienation. Alienation in the sense that people have become increasingly alienated and estranged, become detached from their environments, become detached from their own, social groups. I'll give you one example. When you look at South Korea has, as most of you would agree, it is an affluent country. It is very successful. We have, wonderful products like Samsung that comes from South Korea. But because of alienation of the youth, you know that South Korea has the highest suicide rate in the world. There are more people in South Korea below the age of 40 killing themselves. So there must be something terribly wrong that's going on, even though they have experienced affluence in those countries. And when we look at greed, grievance, anxiety, fear, hatred, racism, alienation, what comes out of it for anyone who has studied, researched, violence and the outbreak of, structural and physical kinds of conflict right around the world will say that these are the various ingredients that spur violence right around the world. What I want to focus my attention with whatever few minutes that I have left is on the ecological problems, climate change, pollution, deforestation, loss of biodiversity, etc., and the health issues in relation to the COVID pandemic. So if the last 40 years with neoliberal economic, social, and political kinds of changes in the world, we have, in fact, a number of scientists have predicted that we are going to experience a pandemic. And if anyone that says that this COVID was sudden, that no one expected it, it's not true, because scientists have, in fact, for quite some time, they have predicted that something like this is going to happen. And why did they do so? Because you have various books that have been published. For example, the book by Rob Wallace, which is entitled Big Farms Make Big Flu. And he relates, in fact, this book was published before the COVID pandemic, but he has, in fact, through the focus on the number of different kinds of coronavirus epidemics, I would say, or coronavirus sorts of, infections in different parts of the world, he has established a very convincing connection between the agribusiness, land cleared for farming, deforestation, the kinds of environmental changes. And he refers to it as the transformation of planet Earth to planet farm. And when you have deforestation and the increase of agribusiness and clearing of large areas of land, you have, in fact, viruses that existed naturally. And in this case, in the pandemic, that some have, associated, or some have linked the start of this COVID pandemic to Wuhan. And what we actually see happen in Wuhan is the expansion of the population in that part of China, with the deforestation, with the large areas of agribusiness, and all that needed was the spillover, what scientists refer to as the zoonotic virus from animals to humans. So it could have been the bats, because these viruses exist. The coronavirus exists naturally in many of these animal populations. And once people come closer to these animals, that's when the virus can then jump from animals to humans, and then begin to mutate. And so today we have this problem. Now, when we also look at neoliberalism, we find that it has stimulated these large pharmaceutical firms, and these pharmaceutical firms have made enormous amount of profit from what's actually happening in the case of the pandemic at the moment. If you look at right around the world, all these pharmaceutical companies, their shares have increased. They have made millions and billions of dollars as a result of producing the various kinds of vaccines and the various sorts of of medicines that are believed to help, not cure, but to help to relieve the effects of COVID-19. Now, these big pharmaceutical firms, they also have increased their profits through the testing regimes that was needed. So just imagine that all those various sorts of companies, corporations right around the world, and these corporations function as many as this book entitled "Big, Pharma and Big Greed," and here how they have control through the various politicians, they have control over corporations and think tanks and the media and the critique. The popular writer Naomi Klein refers to these kinds of sorts of corporations taking advantage of disasters, whether it's to do with tsunamis or whether to do with hurricanes, and here at the moment with COVID-19, which is clearly a disaster that's confronting us today, is what is referred to as disaster capitalism. So the commercialization of healthcare, medicine, and the prioritization of private interests over public ones, these are all have become they have become sort of visible as a result, and they've been exposed as a result of the pandemic at the moment. And you find these large pharmaceutical companies, they are more interested in designing cures rather than preventive medicine. Because if people are in good health, then they'll run out of business. So they actually want people to be sick. And more people who are sick, the better profits that they gain. And that's the kind of capitalist situation that we have. Now, Jeffrey Sachs, so when we look around the world, we find that, as Jeffrey Sachs has presented here, that because of the cutbacks of funding states have provided for, say, hospitals, for the various healthcare facilities, because of wanting to make savings, and this is in relation to the neoliberal policies. And as Jeffrey Sachs, the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University, has said, we don't have a public health system. So if you look at the United States, at the height of the pandemic, a country that has the greatest military in the world with hardware, produces all these marvelous missiles, could not protect the people, its citizens, from this deadly disease. And the reason for this is we don't have a public health system. We have a for-profit private system. We have tens of millions of people who have no health coverage because the focus has been on private insurance. We have no systematic testing. We are scrambling, and it has been weeks with the virus multiplying, with the pandemic spreading in the United States. And this is the situation in what is regarded as the most powerful country in the world. So what hope is there for other countries? So we have also we also have, for example, increasing social inequality. So sometimes we find that people will say we are all in it together. The virus does not discriminate. Yes, the virus does not discriminate. It does not check to see whether you're rich or poor before it affects you. But however, we also have to keep in mind that the pandemic has actually shattered that notion that we are an equitable society, because what it has exposed is the inequality, but it was also a driver of it. So we find that in different parts of the world, the more vulnerable communities, and especially women, have been affected disproportionately. Many of the women whose, they have been forced through the lockdowns to stay home. Now, I should also point out that, when someone speaks about a lockdown, they say that a lockdown is causing a great deal of, economic damage, and it's destroying economies. And sometimes, we have to remind these economists that it is not the lockdown that is causing the economic, problems or the damage. It is actually the virus. And what the public health you know, authorities, what they are trying to do is to curb the spread of the virus, and the lockdown is one of the measures. So Nicholas, Christakis, in his recent book entitled Apollo's Arrow, which focuses on the COVID pandemic, and he says that plagues reshape our familiar social order, require us to disperse and live apart, wreck economies, replace trust with fear and suspicion, invite some to blame others, and this is the case that has been going right around the world. You know how they refer to it as a Chinese virus, and they blame the Chinese for it. And in different parts of the world, you have groups of people that have been targeted and blamed for it. For the predicament, embolden liars and cause grief. But he points out too that plagues are also elicit kindness, cooperation, sacrifice, and ingenuity. So the question I want you to think about and to look at is what needs to change. And I have very little time to speak on this, but I will very quickly point out we need to change the perspective, new way of looking at something. We have to change the goals that we are driving. So the goals from focused on economic growth to maybe focused on well-being of humans for a better world. We have to change the behavior or habit, ways of dealing with something. We have to perhaps, and I'll give you some ideas about this. We have to also change the method and plans, the way to make a better world, whether the current system of sustainable development goals or the focus on development, is this really a method or plan that is going to create a better world? And the direction and process, how are we going to achieve this better world? And finally, in a post-COVID world, these are some of the various on the basis of my own anthropological work, and as well as the wisdom that I've gained from the various studies that I've conducted among indigenous peoples. These are the few conclusions I want to make. One is the economic shift. We have to shift from an obsession with growth and profit to needs-based simplicity and sufficiency. Now, there are several countries in the world now that have ceased using economic, the GNP, or the gross national product, as a way to measure its economic progress. And these countries focus on what has been referred to as well-being. There are 5 countries in the world that have adopted this as post-COVID strategy. And these countries are Finland, Scotland, Wales, Wales, and New Zealand. So I think I missed one country. But anyway, the interesting thing about Ireland, and the interesting thing about these 5 countries is that 3 of these countries are led by women. And there must be something to it. So the focus is on people and planet rather than profits. Ecological and community health, we had to place it before economic wealth. A very important thing that we should reflect on and try to build in what we consider to be build back better is change from our current anthropocentric, human-centered way of dealing with life to an ecocentric living, where the first thing that we should focus our attention on is respect nature. We have to try to rebuild social solidarity, that the way we interact with one another, our way of acting and behaving and being is focused on the social, and rather than just on the economic aspects. And here, for the social solidarity, the focus has to be in cooperation, mutual aid, and generosity. Focus on human well-being and flourishing, as I pointed out, rather than focusing on economic growth or economic matters alone. Promote social justice, equity, social inclusion, and diversity. And I think Indonesia is well placed to show the rest of the world that how you can promote, especially in terms of diversity, and appreciating and valuing diversity within the country. The most important thing, I would say, is to foster empathy, compassion, and caring. During the COVID pandemic, the people that allowed us, the rest of us, to continue to survive, I would say, is largely the ones who are in the caring business, the people who ensured that our streets were clean, the people who ensured that our grocery shops and our supermarkets were well stocked, and the people who are like the healthcare people, the frontliners who risk their own lives in order to show compassion and caring for the people who were suffering from the COVID pandemic. And I think if that is possible, that is something that we should reward. That is something that we should perhaps honor. And most importantly, I think that is what we have to try to promote in this world of ours. So greater empathy, compassion, and caring. Terima kasih.
And local community. From what your explanation, your presentation, I can base what I've learned, from your PowerPoint is that the problems that occur today is because of the massive neoliberal approach to development put forward by the capitalist system. Yeah, and it affects a lot, climate change, pollution, there's forestation, and etc., etc. And even during this COVID-19 pandemic, yeah, it's still, because of this, long years of capitalist application, they cure or the idea of on how to address this COVID-19 is, the same. They use the idea of how to profit this COVID-19 to, commercialization of healthcare. And then Prof. Gomez also share us his idea, his thought about how to change this is to change or to put new or to put perspective, goals, behavior, habit, method, and plan. If you want to, of course, if to against this system is not as easy as that, but at least we can do something. And that's how, I think what Prof. Gomez want to say to us by, economic shift or eco living, yeah, social solidarity, focus on human well-being, etc., etc. Yeah, there are many that we can do. Although the neoliberal approach to development exists, persists still up to these days. Yeah. Thank you again for your perspective, Prof. Now we are coming to the third speakers, Dr. Ayesha Abu Bakar. You want to share your PowerPoint?
Good morning, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And thank you again to the organizing committee of this international conference on humanity issues. And it looks like, you have a very industrious group of postgraduate students at the Universitas Muhammadiyah. So I'd like to congratulate all the postgraduate students of your university, and especially to the committee president, Mr. Akbar Averos Sabil, the head of your master's program, Dr. Sorwad Dono. Thank you so much. And also to the director of the postgraduate program, or earlier it was the head of international relations, Dr. Sawardono, and the director of postgraduate program, Dr. Sri Ajmaja Putra Roslidi. It's good to see you again online. And also good morning to Professor Dr. Alberto Gomez, who's based in Australia. Okay. Again, I'm very happy to be sharing with you what I can, to all our postgraduate students, not only from Indonesia, but I think there are also some other postgraduate students from the region, like from Malaysia, who are joining this morning's conference. What I will be presenting today is actually a rewind or a backtracking before the pandemic happened. Okay, I was invited to speak to you about the research work that I've done for my PhD, and which was published as a book 2 years ago. And this is mainly taking the case study of the Bangsamoro conflict in the Philippines. And just listening from the presentations of my fellow speakers this morning, from Dr. Suwardono and Professor Alberto Gomez, yeah, a lot of the things that they said actually are very much relevant to what has happened and what continues to happen in the Philippines even before the pandemic. One of the important learning that Professor Gomez mentioned is that really the focus on development, whether it's conflict or whether it's in a crisis situation or a pandemic situation or pandemic era that we have today, is really about getting people and the planet at the center of any development work or peace work, for that matter. Okay, so I'll now go directly to my presentation. And again, the focus of the book that I've written is really how do we bring about the connection between development and peace. Okay, especially when you have a protracted conflict. Protracted means, you have a long history of armed conflict in the Philippines, which is mainly with the Bangsamoro non-state armed groups. Okay, so this is where the situation that we have in terms of the conflict in the Philippines with the Bangsamoro group. The ones highlighted in green, these are actually now the areas or the territory that is now part of the recent Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, which is the result of the peace agreement that had been signed in 2014. So when we talk about the conflict and peace process, in the Philippines with the Bangsamoro groups, there are actually two tracks of peace negotiations or peace tracks with the Bangsamoro groups. First was with the Moro National Liberation Front, and the second one was with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. But the focus of the book was really mainly on the MILF, which is the more recent one, in which they have started their peace process only in 1997. And it was in 2001 that the Malaysian government became a third-party facilitator and mediator to this peace process. But after many years, from 2001 onwards, it was really on 2012 that finally the peace process has resulted to a framework agreement on the Bangsamoro. And then later on, they came up with a comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro. Maybe for some of you who might be asking, how come there are two agreements? Basically, the FAB, the first one in 2012, was like a roadmap. Okay, it was not yet the complete agreement itself, but more or less, a lot of the principles of the agreement were there. And then in 2014, that is when they completed, the details of the agreement. I guess when we try to compare this with the Aceh peace process, where you have the MOU in Helsinki, this is to some extent, quite extensive, if compared to the Helsinki, the Aceh MOU, because with the Aceh MOU, you only had one agreement, whereas this one, it's not two agreements, but it's like a continuing body of document. Okay, and they really tried to fill up and to complete as much as possible when they finally signed the 2014 agreement. And just like in the Aceh peace process, which you are more familiar with in Indonesia, it is in 2018, from signing the agreement in 2014, only in 2018 that the peace process was successful to pass this charter or this new law for the establishment of the new government entity, which is now known as the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or BARM. Before BARM, we actually had the ARMM, or ARM. Okay, but because of a lot of the problems, from ARM, and then a lot of the findings that continue to plague the peace process with the first negotiation with the MNLF, there were so many failures from that agreement. So this time with the MNLF peace process, it was a good opportunity for them to correct a lot of all those shortcomings. And so this time with the BARM, we are hoping that we will have a better and more comprehensive type of government entity. When I did the research, it was quite some time. I've actually done the field work, from 2008 to 2000 up to 2012, but I captured the time of 2008 and 2000 until 2011, where you had all these variety of stakeholders. Okay, so I wanted you to see in this map, how extensive the GPH, or the Government of the Philippines and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front process was, as compared to other kinds of peace processes that you can find, in any parts of the world. So with the GPH MILF process, you will notice that while Malaysia is very much at the middle, it is the main third-party facilitator, over the years, there were some innovations that happened, in this peace process, mainly because, we've been doing a lot of learnings, on how important it is that you need not own that the ownership of the peace process cannot be limited only to the two parties and to the third parties, but you really need more support, not only from the local people, local organizations, and also even from international organizations. So this is why the whole process has expanded to include also the International Contact Group, or the ICG, in 2009. So we have had governments, Japan, UK, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, who have taken part, as part of this international observers group. Okay, so when there is a peace negotiation happening in Kuala Lumpur and in Putrajaya, these ICG would be present and they would observe, what is happening in terms of the negotiation. There were also international organizations or international non-government organizations that became part of ICG, and one of which is Muhammadiyah, the social movement, Muhammadiyah, your group, and the Asia Foundation, Conciliation Resources, and HDC, Center for Humanitarian Dialogue. So with all these ICG, there were also, down the line, other observers or participants in the peace process that are mainly trying to help in the peacekeeping, in the monitoring of the actual peace on the ground in the Bangsamoro area. So while the peace negotiation is being done, the formal negotiation, it was so important that keeping the situation in the Bangsamoro areas should not be ridden with armed conflict, with all these incidences of violence. So this is when the international monitoring team in 2004, became very useful. And then I also like to inform you that the IMT was actually not a top-down clamor, or it did not come up as a top-down project. In fact, the idea of having an international monitoring team actually came from the grassroots themselves. So local people themselves, local organizations, peace building community, together with international organizations, that also work with the NGOs in Philippines, were the ones who encourage both parties, both the government and the MILF, that they need to deploy an international monitoring team so that there will be a control of the armed conflict and violence in the Bangsamoro area. Okay, so these are the other organizations that have been involved, not only the IMT, but there were also other smaller groups, both participated by both sides and also from other NGOs. So I will not go through all the groups or the entities, but just to show you that, the work of peace building or putting up a peace infrastructure is actually very, how do you call it? In this process, it has been very comprehensive. A lot of work has been poured into it, and a lot of people actually help, the peace process to become more successful. Okay. Okay. When I was doing the research, a lot of the younger scholars, well, at that time, together with other scholars, everybody who's been doing a PhD work at the time, and of course all the other established scholars in peace studies and conflict resolution, many of the work has really been focused on the conflict itself, on the peace process itself, and at that time when I was doing my own research, there wasn't, I barely read, some work that have been done, in particular when it comes to development, peace and development issues. So I felt early on that, if ever if I'm going to invest a lot of my time in this research work, because it needs, a lot of our passion and effort and resources, I might as well do something, that not many people has done yet. And if it's something, if it is an area of study where I can make a difference. Okay. So during that time, the debates normally that came up, among the international community, and even in the, among the peace constituencies in the Philippines, was whether it is peace that needs to be achieved first, meaning that there has to be a peace agreement first before everybody gets into the work of development work. So is it peace or development? And there was also this idea or challenge, among, especially within the MILF groups and other non-state armed groups, whether the kind of development work that the government is trying to give, to pour in the Bangsamoro area, is if it is in the name of counterinsurgency. Because we are thinking that by doing all this development and rehabilitation work, the government is actually in a way weakening, the support of the non-state armed groups. Okay. Another interesting and provocative question in the minds of all the peace and development workers during that time in the Philippines is, this idea if it is really poverty that is the root cause of the conflict. So with that kind of questioning, then it will be so easy to assume that if we bring in socio-economic development, then that will solve the problem. Okay. Fortunately, during the time of all this robust peace studies and peace building work, in the Philippines, especially with the help of international scholars and and other organizations that really tries to prove peace and peace building work in this context. They've become to understand that there has to be more effort in going about, understanding the kind of development that needs to be done in this context of armed conflict in the Bangsamoro areas. And it was also during this time that the World Bank, as one of the important actor in the Bangsamoro peace process, they've worked with the Bangsamoro Development Agency, which is the MILF development arm. Okay, despite that the peace process was ongoing, as a result of the peace process, both parties, both the government and the MILF, actually came up with a Bangsamoro Development Agency, BDA. So this entity, it's the first time, I think if you go through the literature of any other peace processes in the world, it is only in this peace process that you can find a BDA that has been created even while the peace process is still ongoing. So the idea is that the MILF itself, as a non-state armed group, they have to be starting on planning for themselves. Okay, what is it that they want to achieve if ever they sign a peace agreement, if ever the peace process will become successful in the end. Okay, so together with the BDA and the World Bank, they did this needs assessment study and they came up with this finding, again proving to everybody that it is really not poverty only that is the root cause of the conflict, but in fact it is the main, the core of the problem, or the root of the conflict is really social injustice. And as a result, that is how we have, that is how the conflict developed over the years. Because of this injustice, then there is a lot of inequality that have been experienced, among the Bangsamoro people and other groups, in this area in the Philippines. Okay, so going back again to how I've developed the research, in understanding peace and development in the context of the Bangsamoro peace process. Okay, as I've mentioned that this conflict is a type, if it is a right to self-determination type of armed conflict. Okay, so again, human dignity. Okay, identity politics is very much the core part of this type of conflict. Okay, so that is why if ever there is any resolution, for the conflict, it's not only socioeconomic itself that the people are really concerned of. They do not look at socioeconomic dividend as the only output or outcome that they want to see in development. So this is in where the research problem comes in really trying to explore what then is the kind of development framework that is more suitable in this type of conflict. Okay. We are all aware that peace and peace building, have been defined, by many scholars, over the years, and that in this region, also in Southeast Asia, we have also been using the definition of peace and peace building according to the international community's definition, other scholars' definition. Besides the UN definition of peace building, we have also been understanding peace building as something that is not only top-down peace building, but also bottom-up type of peace building. So the learnings that we get from all these types of or characteristics of peace building is also important for us to take note, because in this situation, in this type of armed conflict, taking the case of the Bangsamoro, this is where I wanted to again investigate, how relevant are these definitions in the context of this case study. So for this case of the Bangsamoro, I came up with this working definition of peace building. Okay. Well, in as much that peace building is also a process of conflict transformation, where you will have all these multiple stakeholders of both horizontal and vertical groups of stakeholders. The idea of peace building is really that we increase the understanding on the violent structures that breeds conflict, be able to build capacities and skills in conflict resolution, and bring about various avenues of cooperation so that we can have a conflict transformation, that we change the relationship from something that is imbalanced or asymmetric relation to something that is a more balanced or symmetric relation. And as a result of the peace process of the Bangsamoro conflict, the kind of government system that the BARM actually have now is what we call, or what the MILF has been promoting as a sub-state type of government. It is not exactly you know an autonomous government, just as we have been learning in the past in terms of ARMM. But what it has been improved on is that it has been given more powers in a way that the government in BARM, would also be a stronger type of government in relation to the Philippine state. Okay. And then in understanding how peace building, how it is become important to sustainable human development. So these are the theories or the theoretical framework that I've been experimenting on. I've realized that both frameworks actually, the commonality of both, it really lies on the idea of developing or focusing on the full human development potentials of communities. So this is where they come together. Okay, and that what is going beyond any peace processes, another important part of peace building is the attainment of reconciliation. Okay. So when we look at the definition of sustainable human development, according to the UNDP, which is the proponent of the Human Development Report since 2004, they've defined human development really as a comprehensive focus of development. So it's not only based on incomes or growth figures, as very well explained by Professor Alberto Gomez, that often our societies, our states tend to look at our incomes or growth figures as a success of how we should be looking at our state of development, when in reality, our societies, our communities, in fact, tend to value more beyond this tend to value more things beyond this statistics. What they want, what we all want, are greater access to knowledge, better nutrition and health services, secure livelihoods, security against crime and physical violence, satisfying leisure hours, political and cultural freedoms, and a lot more. Basically, for us to be feeling that we are fulfilling our full development potentials, is that we can actively participate in our communities. Okay, and as we all know, in order to for the UNDP to capture the imagination of leaders, of state leaders, they try to simplify the idea of sustainable human development by doing all this HDI. So HDI is a ranking based on three things, three simple things in terms of health indicators, education, and income indicators. But in reality, HDI is, again, as I said, it really goes beyond the idea of human development, goes beyond all these indicators, but it tries to remind us about the importance of other values that it's important to development. So in the case of the Bangsamoro context, I've also tried to define what does sustainable human development mean to these communities. So the field work has brought me to the actual place where in these areas, or in these villages or kampong, I've chosen two of these villages that are not accessible to any NGO or any international donor community. So when I did the research, I was very much clear that following, the work of Robert Chambers, that the idea of development intervention is that we should be reaching those areas that are most unreachable to us. Okay, that is the perfect place for us to study if we really want to achieve an impact on our development, the understanding of development. So when I was able to observe and to organize um, trainings and workshops with the community themselves, I've learned that the way that they've defined human development in these communities is precisely, what the human development philosophy is teaching us. It has to be a holistic type of development that does not only involve their physical security or the politics, but everything, including their history, their environment, culture, and religious aspirations. And at the heart of this human development for these communities is really the idea of self-determination and identity values. So that is why it is so important that we locate any development framework in this type of right to self-determination politics. Okay. The book will also will show you that besides looking at the MILF peace process and what is happening in terms of development in these Bangsamoro areas, I've also done some field work in terms of trying to understand the post-conflict and post-tsunami development that have happened in Aceh, where this is a perfect example also of a past uh, development programming. So another case study that I've also done work with is the earlier post-conflict development with the Moro National Liberation Front. We are lucky that in the Philippines, we have had two peace processes. First was the MNLF, which signed a peace agreement in 1996, then later on with the MILF. So because of that precedent case, definitely it offered many, many learnings, not only in terms of the political process, but especially in terms of post-conflict development. So among just some of the learnings from both peace processes, just to show you that in terms of institutionalization, in the Aceh post-conflict and post-tsunami development, it is the BRR that has been an integrator, of all the activities for post-conflict and post-tsunami development. And this is where all the existing government institutions, all the way to your village level, they are organized and supervised by the BRR. Whereas for the MNLF, or the post-conflict development that have happened with the MNLF process, okay, what the government of the Philippines did is that they actually they also came up with another entity, okay, but this entity was actually a partnership between the government of the Philippines and the UN multi-donor program. So there is this kind of entity that has been supervising this one program for post-conflict development. The program was called Act for Peace program. So if you notice here, UNDP as a donor organization was very much at the forefront of the work of post-conflict development as compared to BRR. While it is true that there were a lot of donor funding that came to Aceh and to Indonesia, still the driver in terms of the work of development was really this government institution called the BRR, and later on the BRA, and together with the BRA. Okay, and then another interesting learning that we can get from the MNLF post-conflict development is that with the Act for Peace, they had to come up. Okay, they had to create all these small communities called peace and development communities. So as compared to the Aceh process, where you already have your existing kabupaten or villages that the BRR or the BRA works with, for the MNLF, which was a work done with UNDP, they came up with another type of unit or development units called the PDCs. while to some extent the PDCs were successful in terms of bringing about social change and really making the PDCs become independent, at the same time, we've also learned that the PDCs, because they are, a new institution, okay, they are not part of the political unit of the government. It has not had. It was unfortunate that it had its weaknesses. It's for it to be sustained. Okay, just to show you also, how BRA again is also driven mainly by the government as compared to the MNF process. Okay. Again, just to summarize, what are the lessons learned from both the ACHE peace process and the MNLF peace process that can be useful to the MILF peace process? Just to remind you that when I was doing the research work, and at the time when I finished the work, I finished the PhD, the peace agreement was not yet there, okay, or was not yet completed. So to me, it was just the right timing to have finished and completed the work. And so these findings, were very useful during that time. And I had the opportunity. I have had the opportunity to present this actually to the Bangsamoro Development Agency. So just to enumerate some of these learnings is that first, a purely socioeconomic development approach to conflict communities is insufficient. Second, it is so important that the main requirements of a peace agreement needs to be identified. So these are where the details are very important. How do you actually go about in implementing a peace agreement? Okay. Then third, government must provide the monetary resources and cooperation from all its agencies. If I'm going to say it at this point, that if I compare Aceh and what's happening now in the Bangsamoro with the new BARM government, Aceh has really been very lucky in this sense, because the government of Indonesia has really been very clear on how much are they giving to the Achenese government, and the money has really been made available to the Aceh government as compared to what we are experiencing today in the BARM, which remains to be a challenge. The commitment of the Philippine government in terms of monetary resources to BARM continues to be an issue at present. Fourth is that support of international actors and guarantors are very important in many ways. While during the height of the peace building activities in the Philippines or in the Bangsamoro region, it is normal that a lot of the international organizations and the local organizations will always be, in conflict. They themselves will be in conflict, and they will not be in agreement in many times in how to go about the work that needs to be done in this conflict area, because of differences of opinion and differences of means and methods. Okay, but nevertheless, while we, as in the local communities, while they are aware that we need the international community, it's also important that local communities have to assert the ownership to any peace building or development work that needs to be done in their areas. Okay. And again, just to reiterate that it's so important that local capacities of the communities are really the core of development. Okay, if we continue to rely on international actors or even with other actors outside of the conflict communities, then we cannot ensure the durability of peace, because there is no capacity that will be nurtured among the communities itself in the conflict affected communities. Okay. Then six is that just like with what happened with GAM, with the Free Aceh movement, there has to be a transformation of the non-state non-state armed groups, like with GAM, and now also with the MILF and with the MNLF. So there needs to be a way for them to transform themselves from becoming a non-state armed group, for them to be part of the political arena. And lastly, with all the peace building infrastructure in place and the work of peace and peace building, that in itself should fuel a transformation of the relationship between the BARM as a government and the state itself, the Philippine state, and the same way with the people, the people in the BARM and the people with the whole, the Filipino society. So there has to be a change of that relationship. There has to be a more equitable relationship so that we can use this as the best indicator of a successful peace process. And this is where what we've been hearing this morning about the importance of local ownership and local participation in this pandemic era. You know, while a lot of our countries tend to be very state-centric in making decisions in terms of lockdown, you know, as a means to control the pandemic. In the same manner, this is where we learn that even in this situation of peace and peace building, again, we cannot underestimate the power of local participation, because in the end, it is really the local communities themselves that will sustain any development intervention or any means of survival of our communities. Okay, so these are the two frameworks that the work, you know, has been presenting. Again, looking at both frameworks as reinforcing frameworks, and at the heart of it is really to achieve human development outcomes, and with a focus on giving right to self-determination as the aspiration of the people. Okay. Okay, I will, again, I've explained this already, so I will skip this part. Okay, so this is the outcome of the theoretical framework. I call this the electric fan framework. So basically, just to emphasize that, you know, when we talk about human development, it has to include everything, not only social outcomes, but also cultural, religious, economic, environment, security, and of course the political outcome that is supposed to bring about institutional building and a governance system that is more suitable for the context. Okay, and then we cannot forget, and you know, in as much that we might have a new political entity, you know, we cannot forget, you know, the tradition of peace and peace building. So hopefully what we have now in the BARM is something that is also founded on peace and peace building values. You know, so these are the learnings that we get, and that in as much that peace negotiations are normally political in nature, you know, at the same time there are many things that we need to emphasize that should bring about durable peace, like peace building mechanisms built in the governance system. Okay, so just some pictures on during the time when I was doing my field work. Okay. So to conclude, what were the three, if I'm going to list, you know, the three important takeaways from the book that you can also get, is that, as I mentioned earlier, both frameworks of sustainable human development and peace building are actually mutually reinforcing, and they achieve, you know, they achieve the same human development goals. And that if we look at the pursuit of right to self-determination, we should actually, states normally are very scared of this term right to self-determination, because they tend to associate it as a sovereignty issue. It is a threat to sovereignty issue of a state, when in reality what right to self-determination really means is really increased participation, equitable participation from all of us, from the local communities. So we should look at right to self-determination as a positive force, in fact, to any peace and development context and work. Lastly, in any political peace negotiation, development philosophy or the framework for development cannot be an afterthought, you know, an afterthought activity. Okay, while they are doing the peace negotiation, they cannot put aside a development framework and development planning as something that they should be doing after the negotiation. In fact, they should be putting it right beside the political process, because a lot of the decisions that needs to be done in development has to be anchored on the political decision making. And this is where it's to some extent in the MILF peace agreement or the comprehensive agreement of the Bangsamoro, a lot of all these development issues have also been reflected in that agreement. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ayesha, for the point of view and your sharing in the context of Bangsamoro peace process. So from what I learned from the three presentation from the three speakers, there are links, of their point of view. The first from Dr. Surandono talk about the issues or the impact of COVID-19 to human security. One of them in peace and conflict situation and development. And also Prof. Gomez has discussed solution, one of them is how to create social justice. And then the case of or the presentation of Dr. Ayesha discussed in more specific in the context of Bangsamoro, a peace process, which is like, what I've learned, social injustice is one of the keywords that should be addressed, and then how the creation of symmetrical relation among actors, not only not only top down, but also bottom up relation, listening or the local people, creating cooperation or collaboration between all actors, including government and the local people, become one of key point, how the peace process can be sustained in Bangsamoro context. Okay, we've got 30 minutes left for this discussion, and I would like to invite four participants to express their questions. If you want, so guys, for the participant, if you have some ideas, maybe, or you want to, you need to further, like, clarification from the speakers, it's your time. Yeah, you can, you can say your name, institution, and then to whom you want to destinate your questions. You can raise hand, or you can type your question in the chat room if you like. Okay. Yeah, I open this first round for four questions, four people. Okay. First, from Rika Aulia. Okay.
Uh, Thank you so much for the opportunity. So I want to ask question to Mr. Alberto Gomez. My name is Rifka Aulia. I'm from University of Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. In the previous discussion, Mr. Albert said that when we have a dream, but it turns out as a nightmare, then one of the solution is we can just change the dream. So I want to ask that, is this only the solution for the upper class, like for the capitalists, or for the, for the upper class, and that they don't even care about the bad impact for others community? And how to make it possible for the equality to have a dream or change the dream when some people in this world even don't have any courage for just have a hope, such as in people in the conflict area or for refugees. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Rika. Are there more questions? We will collect first for the 4 questions, the speakers. Then I will, after that, yeah, you can, respond to their questions. And then more question. Okay, first, the second, Arianto. Arianto. Yeah. Can you unmute your Zoom?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thanks for the chance and possibilities here. Very good presentation, very remarkable presentation of Professor Sarwandono, of Professor Alberto Gomez, of Dr. Aisyah We Abu Bakar. And then I would like saying that everything come here into easiness to be able to understand that everything before that come into my mind before the presentation is abstract. Then so many points that not coming into dissociation, into come up together.
Hello,
Then,
Arianto, can you a bit slower so that we can catch your eye point, please?
oh yeah, okay, thank you. I would like to ask question for Dr. Aisyah Abu Bakar. Then, before I have listed on Bang Samoro, also on people of Maguindano and Sulu. And then they want to ask question about final peace agreement 1996 and CAB for 2014. Then so many people believe that final peace agreement before that facilitated by Indonesia is fragile than before. And then it come into file of 10 years come into file. Then followed by CAB 2014. In my context of question is, on this condition of a file between MNLF or ERMM since 1996, what it come also with MLF in 2014 of CAB. And then thank you. And this condition is perhaps the same because so many people, so many scientists, so many researchers also, patient Mandela fragile also, just like 2014 from GAB. And then it would perhaps like then 1996 of final peace agreement perhaps. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you. Okay. 2 more questions. Are there more? Oh. Oh, Arianto, Dr. Aisyah has sent a message through chat room. Can you confirm that? Yeah, to make sure that we get what your questions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. In my knowledge, in my reading before, the MNLF in 1996 have tremendous success of proper peace agreement in final peace agreement that was mediated by Indonesia. But then at that time, 2000, at the time of year 2000, there was conflict in Alberta. Then make the negotiation file, the peace building, peace monument file of the IRMM. Then okay.
Yeah, can you go to your chat room and read the message from Dr. Aisyah?
Okay.
Yeah, what happened? So basically, you want to ask what happened to the MNLF peace agreement, and was the 1996 MNLF agreement a success?
A file. A file. A failure. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. More questions from the other participants? So we are expecting 2 more questions from participants. Either you can raise your hand or you can type in your question through chat room. Okay. Since we got two questions, yeah. First, from Rika, yeah, she asked question to Prof. Alberto about the change of, like, the idea of the change the dream about the upper class, how to make possible about equality, uh, and also there is another question from Arianto to Dr. Aisha, and maybe although there is no question to Dr. Swandono, that you may want to respond to some of this question, maybe because I know that you have got an experience to the Philippine peace process as well. Okay. Yeah. So give a time to Prof. Alberto first.
Okay, thank you. It's Rivka, is that right? Is that your name?
Yeah, Rika.
Rivka. Yeah, thank you very much for that really very good question. Now, as you can see, I have lots of gray hair, so I have lived in this world very much longer than you have. And I think most likely with everyone else here, I've come to a point in my life where I have lost complete confidence in the so-called upper class. I've lost confidence in the upper class. I'm sorry to say this to you, it might sound terribly, depressing or disappointing, but the people who are the elites in this world that we live in are not going to make the changes that we want. And so, and that also applies to the multilateral agency. I know my fellow speaker is talking about the UN and the various organizations and the World Bank. And sadly to say that these multilateral organizations are not going to make the changes that we want to see in this world today. The only way that we can make those changes and those new dreams that I'm talking about, planting the new seeds, are us, we. And always remember that if you think that you lack the power to do anything, or if you think that you just do not, as a young person like yourself, that you can't make change in this world, you must always remember that it is through the cooperation, through the collaboration, through all of us coming together as individuals, that we can make change happen in this world. So I think it's really important that we do whatever we can to make the change. And that's why, as a university professor in 2014, I have been teaching for such a long time. In fact, I follow what Karl Marx has said in his 11th thesis to Feuerbach. He says philosophers have so far interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. That was the 11th thesis that he gave to. So the point here I'm trying to make is that as a scholar, as a researcher, we have done so much work. I mean, with my own research among the Orang Asli, I have written so many things about the Orang Asli. And the thing is that no change is going to happen. So I've changed my way of thinking. That's why I talk about changing the perspective. So I've changed my way of thinking because now I always present a different way of talking about the Orang Asli. And what I say is that I'm not going to talk to you about the Orang Asli, but I'm going to talk to you about what you can learn from the Orang Asli. So the Orang Asli, the Orang Asal, the indigenous peoples, and the older people, I think a few years ago, I was invited to give a keynote at your university, and they were surprised because they were expecting me to talk, since I'm based in Australia, that I was going to talk about how the West is going to come and save the rest of the world. But instead, I pointed out that the wisdom that we have in Asia, that in the Asian century, we have to rely on our traditions, on our own Asian traditions, values, and culture, because that's going to form the basis, not the Western way of thinking, not Western epistemologies, not Western knowledge. In fact, the knowledges that we have had, when I taught a course, for example, in Innsbruck, and I talked about alternative epistemologies, and I pointed out that sometimes what your grandmother tells you is in fact much more valuable than what you read in the social theory book. because they have the traditional wisdom that we have discarded. And the reason we have discarded, I'm sorry to say this, Aisha, but the reason that we have discarded this is because of development. Because we think that the Western models that have been presented to us are far more superior than the models and the various cultures that we have. When we talk about peace process, often, some Western expert is going to tell you this is how you do it. But actually, the people themselves in the ground, they have been working traditionally to build peace, to dialogue, to construct, ways of creating, their own. And while it is important for us to read theoretical work, and all those are important, but we must never ever discard our own sorts of knowledges, ideas, and our own sort of dreams that we have. And Raymond Williams, the Marxist, has pointed out, and I have to keep reminding myself what he has said, but let me just give me a second. And what he says is that to be truly radical, so all of us have to be radical, in a sense, radical, not in the bad way, okay, because radical itself is given a negative perspective. But to be truly radical, in other words, the word radical here means going to the roots of our own, to our own culture. So to be truly radical, and the word radical comes from roots. That means we accept what are the fundamental, aspects of our life. And he says to be truly radical is to make hope possible rather than despair convincing. If you feel despair, this is precisely what the upper class, the people who are the elites, the politicians, they want you to feel despair. Because if you have hope, then hope means that you want to make a change, and they don't want change to happen. The people who run the corporations, they don't want you to change. They want you to continue drinking Coca-Cola. They want you to continue, using the various kinds of, the corporation products that they're presenting. Because if you begin to ask questions, if you begin to be critical, in other words, when you are trying to establish what is a new future, or if you're trying to kind of set up hope for a better world, then that better world is going to exclude them. And so that's why it's really important as a young person, always maintain this important, the important principles that we want to make sure that the wisdom that we have from the indigenous peoples, the wisdom that we have from our own Asian cultures and traditions, the wisdom that we have got from the older generation who were able to live in ways that are a lot happy. Today, sorry, I'm going on talking, but today you have all the things that you want. You've got mobile phone, you have, Netflix, you have everything that you want. And you feel that you got many friends on Facebook, you say, I've got so many friends, but you are still unhappy. And the question is, why? Why are you unhappy? It's because you have, alienated yourself. You have detached yourself from the realities. The most important thing in our lives today is nature, and nothing else matters. I mean, I look at, Aisha's, background, and I feel, wow, look at that. You have nature behind you. I only have books, but look at that. You have a mountain, you've got the forest, and that is what is the most important thing. So, alam sekitar, the nature, and Mother Earth, these are the fundamental aspects of our lives. And once you begin to detach yourself from nature, then you lose hope. So that's, my answer to your question, but sorry for going on and digressing and moving away from it, but don't ever give up hope.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you
Prof.
so much,
Gomez, for
Professor
the very
Gomez.
insightful comments and answer. And I'm sure the student, or even me, learn a lot. It's for self-reflection for that points. And also coming to the second speaker, Dr. Aisha, you want to share ideas?
Thank you very much. Before I answer Arianto's question, I'd like to re-echo what Professor Gomez mentioned. about how we should be doing our own self-determination. That is exactly our experience in the Bangsamoro peace process, and that's the reason why I did the research that I did in my PhD. So it came to our awareness during that time that we cannot rely on UN and World Bank defining for us, what kind of development we want to happen in the Bangsamoro, especially that, again, just to answer some of Arianto's questions, especially that we learned that from the MNLF peace process, we did not have the development expectations. We were not able to achieve those development expectations, just as the government and the UN multi-donor company have promised us. So that was one of the failures. So it was during that time when I was doing the research that the idea also of MILF of doing Islamic development was something that is a threat to the Filipino nation and even to donor agencies, knowing that MILF is very much a religious organization as much as they are a non-state armed groups as compared to MNLF, which was more secular in terms of politics, but not MILF. So at the height of all these apprehension of MILF saying that we want an Islamic development. So that was to me an opportunity in trying to probe what do they mean by Islamic development? Is it something like Saudi Arabia? Is it something like other places in Africa? What Islamic development do they want? So that became an opportunity, to investigate further. And fortunately, when I had the opportunity to present the electric fan model to the MILF leadership, and they told me, to my surprise, that that is what they want. Perhaps I did not have to put in detail to how much it caters to their philosophy, but the minute that they saw that it was a comprehensive development, it has equal weight, not only in terms of political development, but especially in terms of culture, nature, the society itself, all this intercultural arrangement, and of course the history itself of the Bangsamoro people. So to them, that is so important. And I forgot to mention to you in the last slide, I actually showed a book called the Bangsamoro Development Plan. As a result of my presentation to the MILF, they actually adopted the electric fan model and put it as part of the Bangsamoro Development Plan, but with modifications. What they did was that they put, as in the surrounding electric fan model, the values, the BDA values. And those values are actually Islamic values or Muslim values. So that's the only thing that they added. Again, to emphasize about the agency of people, as the catalyst for development, and how important is development and values in doing the development that they want to happen in the Bangsamoro area. So to some extent, while the Bangsamoro Development Plan is not the development plan that they are now doing in the new BARM, but it made it served them as a guide in doing the new BARM development plan. Okay, because when I presented to them, to the MILF, the electric fan model, the way I explained it to them that, look, we've already learned a lot of failures from other conflict and peace processes. One thing for sure is that any donor agency that is coming to us, they will insist on their development framework. So you might as well come up with a development framework that you will define yourself, instead of you being blind and following whatever is given to you. So that was the opportunity to come up with that development plan framework, or the electric plan, for them to adopt it. So to continue, to answer quickly Arianto's question, again, thank you so much, Arianto. Well, it is very much recognized Indonesia's role in producing the final peace agreement with the MNLF in the 1996 final peace agreement. Unfortunately, that was really that peace process was not a complete peace process. because the MILF was not part of that peace process. So you already have a weakness there. You have two groups of Bangsamoro groups, but only one group was taking part in that formal peace process, the MNLF. Naturally, after the MNLF peace process, later on, the government of the Philippines came up with the peace process for the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. That is one problem that we experience. Second is that in terms of the third party role of Indonesia being the mediator, it was also unfortunate that it was the first time that Indonesia is taking also part in this type of peace process. So of course it had its own learning curve, and to some extent, although in the past the government of the Philippines have had some experience of third parties with the OIC, but with the Indonesian government and Philippine government experience, it became a very different dynamic, precisely because Indonesia and Philippines are part of the ASEAN community. So that idea of ASEAN, of non-intervention, has also limited, the capacity of Indonesia, to what extent they can push the envelope, and to what extent they have to be working side by side with the Philippine government. While it is true that with the Malaysian participation as third party is in a way similar. You also have another ASEAN country, but precisely because of the lessons learned from the Indonesian experience of facilitation, both the Philippine government and Malaysia has taken up those learnings, to what extent they can do better in doing this type of peace process. So that is one level. And the other level of failure, if I may say so, which is already very much recognized in the international community and among the peace building community and development community, is that a lot of the development work that was done post-conflict after the MNLF were really a failure because, as I mentioned earlier, they were organizing peace and development communities. Again, it was not sustainable because you are coming up with other entities that will not be fully supported by government itself, because precisely you had a weak political agreement. So it is not something that can be on equal footing, as another political entity in terms of development programming and implementation, as compared to what is happening now with the MILF, where the MILF itself is a government. It has more powers to do its own development work in relation to the Philippine government agencies. So this is where we are improving down the line in terms of development work.
Thank you, Dr. Aisyah. Aisyah, for
Thank
your
you.
point of
Remarkable,
view.
Len.
Pak Sur, do you want to add anything, or you want to comment from the participants' questions, or you want to comment from the other speakers' comments?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ari Paksi. I'm very agree with Professor Roberto Gomez. It's very important when to facing about the complexity of COVID pandemic. We must work together. We must to make a better solidarity. So my conclusion when we study from the first few application that built by Leiden University, it is a must how to make better society, better international. That's right. It is a must. We must discuss about the better agenda setting. Like when we discuss about the vaccine production, we not discuss about the agenda setting. So the pandemic issues was exploited by powerful actors. So it is a must. We empower your capacity, empower your state, empower your institution to share idea, to share knowledge, and so on. So we can eliminate the worst of COVID-19 soon. Okay, thank you very much, Mas Ari. It's my final response to all of participants, and I have idea with Ibu Aisyah Abu Bakar. I joined with the ICG from Muhammadiyah, and I take my dissertation about the final peace agreement. I think it's very agree with your your argument, your idea in this session. Thank you very much, Ibu Aisyah Abu Bakar. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Everybody, let's give applause to the three speakers. Yeah, for the insightful ideas, knowledge that they share to us. And then I've seen here in the chat room there is comments from international participant. Yeah, her name is Christina Cabrejas, who comments about the local wisdom. Christina, you want to like to say something about your comments and share to the other participants and speakers? Hello, Christina. Okay.
Mas Ari, I saw the. Sorry, can I speak?
Yeah, you can share.
Can I say something to Christina's? Okay. So the point I was trying to make is that we have to learn from the, yes, Asian wisdom is important, but I think it's also let me backtrack a little. A friend of mine by the name of Boaventura de Sousa Santos, who is based in Portugal, he is a really renowned European philosopher. And what he says is that Europe has been teaching the rest of the world for the last 500 years. And he has been teaching the rest of the world for 500 years, and it has lost the capacity to learn. So in other words, Europe has been teaching and the West has been teaching the rest of the world for all this while that they don't want to learn from us. So what we need to do is to seek ways of how our knowledges, our epistemologies, our way of thinking, our way of interacting with one another can in fact begin to change the thinking on these issues. And there is something else that if I can say, that it's not just about thinking, it's not just about the theories that we use, the methods, but it is also the vocabulary, the words that we use, the concepts. And so here, let me just not to take issue with your presentation, which I love, Aisha, but you take the word sustainable, and sustainable, is in relation to the Sustainable Development Goals. This is one of the ways of how the West and the Western experts continue to dominate the rest of the world, because they have used a set of concepts to begin to get you to, it's called, discourse. So you begin to use the same words, the same kind of nouns. And so what Boaventura de Sousa Santos has stressed is that we have to have new language and new vocabulary. So the words like development, which actually has led to destruction, is a word that we have to try to drop and try to look for something else. So how about using the word, if you remember in my presentation, I did not use the word development, I used the word flourishing. So how about let's take sustainable. I do not use the word sustainable, as I think Mas Ari knows in all the classes you've done. I believe in regeneration, because the word sustainable relates, when the meaning of the word means to hold on, to defend, to protect, to sustain, to keep things going. The question is that, can we continue the current system that we have? The system that we have cannot be continued, because if we continue with the way we live our lives today, climate change, nature is going to get us. So what we need is look at new ways of speaking about it. So I don't use the word sustainable, I use the word regeneration, because it's natural. So in other words, how do we come up with regenerative peace process rather than sustainable peace? So the language, the vocabulary, the words that we use, the concepts all relate very much to the change in the way we think, because we think through words and we need to change those words in order to think differently. So that's just my, you know, way to put the, as they say, put the spanner in the works. So you're going to, if you are so used and so, accustomed to those words, those concepts that you have been educated with in your university degree, it's so difficult for you now to rethink those words. But then I think that's where it ought to start. And the thing is, one more statement I'll make and then I'll finish. Take, for example, the word development. So when I first started as an undergraduate student, I started to be very critical of the concept of development. But every time we criticize the concept, you find that they come up with, we should come up with human development, gender development, sustainable development. We have to come up with participatory development. So the word development stays, but the adjective keeps changing. So we change, human development, gender development, sort of from economic development, it's gone to all these different adjectives, to describe the word development. But the problem is not with the adjective. It's important to have gender equality. It's important to have good environmental, policies. The problem is to do with development, which is to do with the fact that you get top-down, a group of people deciding how your life should be conducted. And that's the problem. Not so the noun is the problem. We got to change that, not sticking adjectives to it and making it. Every time we criticize, we say, development does not consider gender issues. So that's okay. We'll come up with gender development. And we say, but development does not, look at environmental issues. Okay, that's okay. We come up with sustainable development. So every criticism that you make, the concept, the people who have developed those concepts, then what they do is they incorporate the criticism into those concepts, but the noun continues. And that's where the problem is. So once we start thinking that development is actually destruction, and then, we begin to think more carefully and we think twice about using that word. And the other thing is for you to consider is the words that we use in our everyday speech. We use words like target, aim. We use words like bombard. And all these words are militaristic terms. And we use it in our everyday language and we talk about peace. So we say that we want to fight for peace, but, fighting is, violence. And so, the language has to change. That's the point I'm trying to make. Thank you. I've finished.
Assalamualaikum. Newton ya computer mas ada kusuma paksi.
So we'll finish from here for the discussion. I'll give the time now for the organizer. Thank you again for the three speakers. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, give applause for our three keynote speakers and our moderators today. We say thank you very much to our three keynote speakers, Professor Dr. Alberto Gomez, Dr. Aisyah Abu Bakar, Dr. Surwandono, and thank you very much to the Director of Postgraduate Program, Mr. Insinyur Sri Atmaja Putra Roshidi, And thank you very much to the Secretary of International Relations Master Program, Dr. Ahmad Sahide. And before closing, let's take a photo together. And so please the committee to take a screenshot, and to all participants are requested to turn on the camera. And so okay, let's start from the first slide. Ready? Okay, wait. Okay, let's start from the first slide. I'm counting down. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay. Next slide. I'm counting down. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, next slide. 3, 2, 1. Okay, the last slide. 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay, thank you. Again, thank you very much to our three speakers and our moderator today. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we move further to the agenda that we are all waiting for, we will have to the short break. And you can relax and enjoy your time to get some lunch and pray. And we will come back for you at 12:40 p.m. in break room, then move to main room at 4 p.m. for announcement. Okay, so don't go anywhere and stay tuned for the rest of the agenda. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum.
Thank you for the participants, Prof. Alberto Gomez and also Ibu Dr. Aisyah Abu Bakar. Thank you very much for your time and sharing your knowledge in this interesting forum today. Okay, thank you very much. Sudah cukup ya?